She was a millionaire mother who had everything money could buy, except her daughter. But one afternoon, a poor little girl knocked on her door, holding an old doll and saying, "Ma'am, your daughter gave me this yesterday." What happened next shattered the woman's heart and changed her life forever. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching? The rain had stopped only minutes ago, but the air still smelled like loss. Elena Morgan stood under the giant oak in Rosefield Park, the one where her daughter Sophie used to chase butterflies every Sunday. The grass was wet, her heels sinking slightly, yet she didn't move. In her hands was a single white rose and a small porcelain doll with faded blue ribbons. Sophie's favorite. Every week, Elena brought one of these dolls, Sophie's old collection, to leave on the bench near the carousel. It was her way of pretending that her little girl still came there to play. She placed the doll down carefully, brushing its dress like she used to brush Sophie's hair. "You liked this one, didn't you?" she whispered. Her voice trembled, brittle and quiet. Around her, the park was empty, except for the distant creak of the carousel turning without music. It almost sounded like breathing, like memory refusing to fade. Elena turned to leave, clutching her umbrella. Her driver waited near the gates, engine humming. She had taken only a few steps when she heard small footsteps splashing through puddles behind her. "Mom?" a tiny voice called. Elena turned. A little girl stood a few feet away, thin, barefoot, with tangled brown hair and a pink raincoat that was at least 2 sizes too big. In her hands, she held the same doll Elena had just left on the bench. Its blue ribbons gleamed in the dull grey light. Elena's heart skipped. "Where did you get that?" she asked sharply. The child's eyes were calm, almost too calm. "Your daughter gave it to me yesterday." For a moment, Elena forgot to breathe. What did you say?" "She gave it to me," the girl repeated softly. "She said I should take care of it for her. She said you'd know why." Elena felt her fingers tremble. That was impossible. Sophie had been gone for a year, buried in the family cemetery outside the city. The dolls were only kept in the locked cabinet in her old room, or left here, on this bench. No one could have given this one away. "Little girl, where are your parents?" Elena demanded. "Who told you to say this?" The girl only tilted her head. "Nobody told me." "Sophie did." Elena's throat tightened. "Sophie," she whispered. You know her name?" The girl nodded. "She told me to tell you she misses your stories about the stars." Elena staggered back as if struck. Sophie had always loved stargazing. Every night they used to sit by the window, making up constellations that didn't exist. No one else in the world knew that detail, not even the housemaids. "How do you know about that?" she asked, her voice breaking. "She said you used to call her something," the girl said, squinting. "Something with a flower." Elena froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "What flower?" The girl smiled shyly. "Sunflower." She said, "Tell Mommy that sunflower still shines." Elena's umbrella slipped from her hand, crashing into the puddle beside her. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. It felt as if the ground beneath her had opened. Only Sophie had ever been called that, and only by Elena, in the quietest moments right before bedtime. Tears blurred her vision. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm Lila," the girl replied. "Sophie said you'd ask me that." Elena pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "Where did you meet her?" "Here," Lila said, pointing toward the carousel. "By the white horse." She was wearing a blue dress and holding a balloon. "She told me you come here every week, but you never smile. She said it makes her sad." Elena shook her head violently. "That's not possible." "You must be mistaken." Lila hugged the doll closer. "She said you'd say that too." The rain began again, slow, heavy drops that felt like the sky was crying with her. Elena looked around, half expecting to see someone watching, someone filming a cruel prank. But the park was empty, silent except for the rain and the sound of her own uneven breathing. "Where's your mother?" she asked finally. Lila pointed toward the far side of the park. "Over there." "She's folding clothes." Elena followed her gaze. Near the gate, under a tree, stood a tired-looking woman sorting laundry into plastic bags. Probably one of the homeless who used the park benches for shelter. The woman looked up briefly, giving a polite nod before returning to her work. "Does she know you're talking to me?" Elena asked. Lila shook her head. "No, Sophie said it was just for us." Elena's lips parted, her voice barely a whisper. Why would she send you?" The girl looked at the doll, and then up at Elena, eyes bright with innocence. "Because you stopped smiling." Elena's composure shattered. A sob slipped out before she could stop it. For the first time in a year, tears poured freely down her face. She didn't understand any of it. The doll, the girl, the impossible words, but something inside her chest cracked open. Something that had been locked tight since the night she lost Sophie. Lila stepped closer, holding out the doll. "She said you can have it back when you're ready to smile again." Elena stared at the porcelain face. It was the same doll she'd placed on Sophie's grave yesterday. She was certain of it. The faint crack on its left cheek. The blue ribbon she had tied herself. How could it be here? How could this child have it? "Keep it," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "It looks better with you." Lila smiled. "She said you'd say that." The little girl turned and ran toward her mother, skipping through the puddles, leaving Elena standing alone beneath the grey sky. The wind lifted her hair, carrying the faint echo of laughter, Sophie's laughter, distant yet unmistakable. Elena's knees buckled, and she sank onto the wet bench, staring at the empty carousel, turning slowly in the rain. Her reflection shimmered in a puddle at her feet, distorted and fragile. For the first time, she whispered her daughter's name out loud, letting it hang in the air. "Sophie, what are you trying to tell me?" And somewhere, deep within the rhythm of the rain, she thought she heard a tiny voice answer, soft as memory. "Smile again, Mommy." Elena closed her eyes, clutching her chest as tears mixed with rain. She didn't know if it was madness, grief, or something divine, but she knew one thing for certain: this was not the end of the story. That night Elena couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that little girl's face, Lila, standing in the rain with Sophie's doll in her hands. The words kept echoing inside her head. "Your daughter gave it to me yesterday." It didn't make sense. None of it did. She had placed that very doll on Sophie's grave the previous evening. The cemetery was locked at night. No one could have taken it without permission. But then there was the other thing, the nickname. Sunflower. That was private. That was sacred. It was the word Sophie had begged her to whisper before falling asleep. How could a stranger possibly know? Elena sat up in bed, drenched in sweat. The city lights outside her window blinked through the curtains like faint ghosts. She pressed her palms against her face. "Get it together," she muttered. "You're losing your mind." The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, marking every second of her sleeplessness. At 3:12 a.m., she finally gave up, walking barefoot to Sophie's room. The door creaked open slowly, the scent of vanilla and lavender still lingering in the air. Everything was exactly as she had left it. The bookshelf, the tiny bed with the pink blanket, the framed drawing that said, "Mommy's my best friend." Elena sank onto the edge of the bed, tracing the edge of the blanket with her fingers. "Sophie," she whispered, "if you're trying to tell me something, I'm listening." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Only the faint hum of the rain outside filled the room. Then something caught her eye, a single sunflower petal on the windowsill. She froze. There hadn't been flowers in this room for months. Her breath hitched as she picked it up. It was real, smooth, yellow, fresh. Her hands shook as she clutched the petal close to her chest. "This can't be happening," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't do this to me." The next morning, her assistant Daniel noticed her pale face as soon as she entered the office. "Ma'am, are you all right? You look unwell." "I'm fine," Elena replied quickly, waving him off. "Just a rough night," but her mind wasn't in the meeting, nor in the endless financial reports or board decisions. Her thoughts kept drifting back to that little girl, her quiet voice, and the doll. Finally, after lunch, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her coat and keys and drove back to Rosefield Park. The sky was clear this time, sunlight glimmering on the grass, but something about the place still felt heavy. The carousel stood still, motionless, its paint peeling off the horses. The bench where she'd met Lila was empty. No sign of the girl, no doll, just the soft whisper of wind through the trees. She asked the ice cream vendor nearby, "Did you see a little girl here yesterday? Around 6 years old? Brown hair? Pink raincoat?" The man scratched his head. "Can't say I did, ma'am. Haven't seen any kid like that in days." "What about a woman folding clothes by the fence?" Elena pressed. He shook his head. "No, ma'am. Sorry." Elena's stomach twisted. She walked the entire park, twice, checking every bench, every corner until the sun began to dip below the skyline. Nothing. The only thing she found was a trail of small footprints in the dirt, washed halfway away by the morning dew. By the time she returned to her car, she felt more lost than ever. Maybe she really was losing her grip on reality. Maybe grief had finally taken her mind. A week passed, but the memory didn't fade. She tried to bury herself in work, but every sound, every flash of blue or pink on the street made her heart race. Then, one afternoon, fate decided to pull her back into the storm. She was at the community donation center, dropping off old clothes from her late daughter's wardrobe. Her housekeeper had suggested it as a way to do something good in Sophie's name. She hadn't planned to stay long, just to sign the papers and leave. But as she stepped into the crowded shelter hall, she froze. There in the far corner, folding donated clothes into neat stacks, was Lila. Her breath caught. "It can't be," she whispered. The girl looked up at that exact moment and smiled as if she had been expecting her. "Ma'am, you came!" Elena's knees almost gave out. "You," she stammered. How are you here?" Lila ran over, clutching a half-folded sweater. "Sophie said you'd come back today. She said you were scared, but you'd still come." The room blurred around Elena. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Stop saying that name," she snapped, her voice shaking. "She's gone. My daughter is gone." Everyone nearby went silent. A woman rushed over, mid-30s, thin, with tired eyes and rough hands. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said quickly, pulling Lila back. "She doesn't mean to upset you. She just says things sometimes." Elena stared at the woman. "You're her mother." The woman nodded nervously. "Yes, I'm Grace. I'm sorry if she frightened you." "She didn't frighten me," Elena said softly. "She confused me." Grace sighed, kneeling beside Lila. "Sweetheart, what have I told you about talking to strangers about your dreams?" Lila pouted. "But Mom, it wasn't a dream. Sophie was real." Grace looked at Eleanor apologetically. "She's been having these dreams lately about a little girl in a blue dress. She says her name's Sophie. We thought it was just her imagination." Eleanor's skin went cold. "A blue dress," she whispered, "with a white bow." Grace's eyes widened. "Yes, how did you know that?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "Because that's what my daughter was wearing the day she couldn't finish." Her throat closed around the word. Grace stood silently, realizing there was more here than coincidence. Maybe it's just a dream," she said carefully, but Lila shook her head with quiet conviction. "No, Mommy. Sophie told me her mum's heart is broken and only I can help fix it." The room fell silent again. Even the volunteers nearby had stopped folding clothes, pretending not to listen. Elena felt tears sting her eyes, but she turned away before anyone could see. "I need some air," she muttered. She stumbled outside into the cold wind, her breathing uneven. Across the street, the traffic lights blurred into streaks of color through her tears. She leaned against her car, clutching her chest. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. "Why her? Why now?" As she sat there, she looked down and noticed something small sticking out of her handbag. The sunflower petal, the same one from Sophie's room. She had left it on the dresser, hadn't she? Her phone buzzed suddenly, a message from her driver. "Mom, your old storage boxes were delivered to the shelter today by mistake. Should I bring them back?" Elena stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Storage boxes. Sophie's things had been packed away months ago. The dolls, the drawings, the clothes. If one of those boxes ended up at the shelter... She turned back toward the building, eyes wide. Oh my God, somehow she already knew. This wasn't coincidence. This was Sophie's way of reaching out, through a doll, through a little girl, through the simple act of giving. As she stepped back into the shelter, she saw Lila standing by the donation pile, holding a box labeled in fading marker, "Sophie's room." Elena's breath caught in her throat. "That's mine," she whispered. "That box belongs to me." Lila looked up at her, eyes soft and knowing. "Sophie said you'd find it when you're ready." Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, her voice trembling. "Ready for what?" "To believe again," Lila said. The world seemed to tilt around Elena. For the first time in a year, she didn't feel empty. She felt something else, something alive, flickering faintly beneath the pain. Hope. That night, Elena sat on the floor of her living room, with the box labeled Sophie's room resting before her like a sacred relic. Her hands hovered over the lid, trembling. The edges were worn, the handwriting faded. Sophie's own little scribbles in pink marker still visible on the side. Mommy's treasures. For a long moment, she couldn't bring herself to open it. It felt like trespassing on a memory that had already been buried. But then, almost as if guided by something beyond her control, she lifted the lid. Inside were fragments of a life once filled with laughter, a small blue dress with a white bow, a stack of hand-drawn pictures, a half-empty bottle of bubble solution, and at the very bottom, a diary, Sophie's diary. Elena gasped softly. She had never seen it before. It was small, with a glittery pink cover, its lock broken. She flipped it open. The first few pages were filled with childish doodles, hearts, stars, and stick figures of Mommy and me. But as she turned the pages, her heart clenched. The entries grew deeper. Simple sentences, but powerful in their innocence. Mommy cries when she thinks I'm asleep. I wish I could make her smile. I prayed today that Mommy would never feel lonely if I ever go far away. I'll send her sunflowers so she knows I'm close. A tear slipped down Eleanor's cheek, dropping onto the page. She whispered, "Oh, Sophie." Then came the final entry, dated just 2 days before the accident. I met a girl in my dream. Her name was Lila. She said her mommy is sad too. I told her that if we both send our mommies a sign, maybe they'll find each other and be happy again. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The words blurred through her tears. Lila. Her name was right there, written in Sophie's handwriting long before they'd ever met. A wave of shivers ran down her spine. This can't be real. Just then a sudden sound startled her, a faint thud at the window. She looked up sharply. The curtains swayed from the night breeze, and something small fluttered onto the sill. A sunflower petal. Another one. Her chest tightened. "Sophie?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you here?" The air around her seemed to thicken, the silence turning almost alive. Then she heard it, faint but unmistakable. A soft giggle. The same laugh that used to echo through this very room years ago. Elena covered her mouth, tears streaming uncontrollably. "My baby." But the sound faded as quickly as it came, leaving behind only the rustling of leaves and the ticking of the wall clock. The next morning, she drove to the shelter again, this time not out of fear or confusion, but out of an unshakable pull. She found Lila sitting near the window, playing quietly with the same doll Sophie once loved. When the little girl saw her, she smiled wide. "I knew you'd come back." Elena knelt beside her. "Lila, can you tell me something? When you talk to Sophie, where do you see her?" Lila thought for a moment, her eyes glimmering. "Sometimes in my dreams. Sometimes when the sunflowers move, even when there's no wind." She smiled softly. "She says she's happy when you smile." Elena's throat tightened. "Did she?" Did she tell you anything else? Leela nodded. She said you should go to the place with the white swings. She said that's where she left her goodbye. Elena froze. The white swings. She knew exactly what that meant. There was only one park with white swings, the one Sophie used to play in, just outside the old neighborhood. Within an hour, Elena was there. The swings squeaked gently under the afternoon breeze, the paint peeling from age. She walked slowly toward them, her footsteps crunching on gravel. Every corner of the park was filled with memories, Sophie's laughter, her running feet, her voice calling, "Higher, Mommy, higher!" Then she saw it. Tied to the chain of the middle swing was a small ribbon, white with faded blue edges. The same ribbon Sophie wore in her hair that last day. Elena's heart stopped. She reached out with shaking hands, untied it and held it close to her chest. There was no one around. Just her, the wind, and the echo of a little girl's laughter that seemed to carry across the park. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. As she stood there, sunlight broke through the clouds, falling directly onto her face. Warm, soft, golden. In that moment, she could almost feel Sophie's tiny arms around her neck, her whisper brushing her ear. "Don't be sad. Mommy, I'm still with you." Elena closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely. "I know, baby," she whispered back. "I know." But when she opened her eyes again, she noticed something at her feet, a piece of folded paper, half buried in the dirt. She picked it up, recognizing the childish handwriting immediately. "When Mommy finds this, tell her to help Lila's mommy too." Her gaze snapped toward the direction of the shelter in the distance. Grace, Lila's mother, the woman who'd looked exhausted, worn, broken. Sophie wasn't just reaching out for her own mother anymore. She was asking Elena to do for someone else what no one could do for her, to heal another heart. And for the first time, Elena understood. This wasn't a haunting. It was a message, a purpose. With the ribbon clenched tightly in her hand, she whispered to the sky, "I hear you, my love. I'll help her." As she turned to leave, a gentle breeze swept through the park, sending a swirl of sunflower petals dancing around her. And somewhere deep in her heart, Elena knew. Sophie was smiling. The following morning, sunlight streamed gently through Elena's window, soft and golden, the kind that used to wake Sophie on school days. For the first time in years, she didn't dread the light. She let it warm her face as she sat quietly at the edge of her bed, the white ribbon still resting in her palm. Her heart felt heavy yet lighter all at once, as if Sophie's touch still lingered around her. But Sophie's last note wouldn't leave her mind. "Help Lila's mommy too." Those 5 words replayed over and over, echoing like a calling. Grace, the woman at the shelter, tired, worn, and carrying the same invisible pain Elena once bore. Elena realized she couldn't ignore it. By noon, she was at the shelter again. Grace was outside this time, hanging donated clothes on a line beneath the warm sun. Lila was chasing butterflies nearby, her laughter bright and free. Elena approached quietly. "Grace!" she called softly. Grace turned, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Oh, Miss Elena, I didn't expect to see you again." "I wanted to thank you," Elena said, forcing a small smile, "for being kind that day, and I think I owe you an apology too." "I wasn't myself," Grace waved a hand gently. "You don't have to apologize. I understand grief better than most." She hesitated before adding, "Lila's father passed away 3 years ago. Since then, it's just been the 2 of us. Things haven't been easy." Elena's heart ached at her words. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Grace nodded, her gaze distant. "But she's strong, stronger than I am, I think. Sometimes she says things that make me feel like she knows more than a child should. She talks about Sophie a lot. At first I thought it was just imagination, but lately—" She paused. "Lately, it feels real." Elena looked toward Lila, who was now gathering wildflowers, sunflowers, small and imperfect, but radiant. "Maybe it is real," she said softly. "Sometimes love finds a way to speak, even when we can't." Grace's eyes shimmered. "I wish I could believe that." Elena smiled faintly. "Then let me show you something." She led Grace to her car and opened the passenger door, revealing the small pink box she had brought with her, Sophie's room. Inside, she gently lifted Sophie's diary and handed it over. "This was my daughter's. Please read this page." Grace hesitated, flipping to the entry Elena had marked. Her hands trembled as she read aloud, "I met a girl in my dream. Her name was Leela. She said her mommy is sad too. I told her that if we both send our mommies a sign, maybe they'll find each other and be happy again." Grace's voice cracked on the last word. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling up. This can't be." Elena's own eyes glistened. "I didn't believe it either, but I think Sophie found Lila. And through her, she found you. Maybe. She knew we both needed healing." Grace broke down then, years of exhaustion and silent pain flooding to the surface. Elena reached out and pulled her into a hug. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. They just held on, two broken souls connected by the invisible thread of two little girls' love. When they finally let go, Lila came running toward them, holding a bunch of sunflowers. "Mommy, Miss Elena! Look, I picked these for you." Grace knelt down, wiping her tears. "They're beautiful, sweetheart," Lila grinned. "Sophie says they're her favorite too." Elena's breath hitched, but this time she didn't feel fear. She felt warmth, pure, quiet, healing warmth. Later that evening, as they sat together in the shelter's small kitchen sharing tea, Elena said, "Grace, what if we start something here, something for kids like Lila, and for mothers like us? A place where people can heal. We could call it the Sunflower Corner." Grace smiled through her tears. "The Sunflower Corner," she repeated softly. "I love that." From that day on, Elena poured her heart into it. She sold one of her luxury properties to fund the project, turning an old community hall into a warm, welcoming space filled with laughter, color, and the scent of fresh sunflowers. Children painted, played, and learned, while mothers found strength in one another's stories. Leela became the heart of it all, her bright smile lighting every corner. And sometimes, when Elena passed by, she'd hear Lila whisper softly to no one, "See, Sophie? We did it." Months later, at the official opening ceremony, Elena stood on stage with Grace and Lila beside her. Behind them hung a hand-painted sign by the children, "For Sophie and all the sunflowers in the sky." As the applause faded, Elena stepped to the microphone, her voice trembling. "I once thought loss meant the end of love," she said. "But I learned something beautiful. Love doesn't end when someone leaves. It changes form. It finds new ways to reach us, to guide us, to keep us alive. This place is proof of that." The crowd fell silent, moved to tears. Grace reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Outside, the evening sun dipped low, casting golden light through the windows. The garden beyond was filled with hundreds of sunflowers swaying gently in the breeze, and for just a heartbeat, just one, Eleanor saw her. Sophie, standing at the edge of the garden, her blue dress fluttering, her smile radiant. She lifted her tiny hand and waved before fading into the sunlight. Elena smiled through her tears. "Goodbye, my sunflower," she whispered. "And thank you." Lila tugged at her sleeve just then, looking up with innocent eyes. "Miss Elena, Sophie says she's proud of you." Elena bent down, pressing a kiss to Lila's forehead. "Then tell her I'm proud of her too." As laughter filled the hall and music played, the golden petals outside shimmered like tiny sparks of light, reminders that love, no matter how far it travels, never truly dies. And for the first time since Sophie's passing, Elena felt something she hadn't in years: peace.